of the province. Birch River's at peak. Roseau River, Sprague, Rata, and Whitemouth sometime in the next 2 to 3 days. Red River between October 17 to 20. And all rivers are expected to stay within banks at this time. Now, there may be some small overtopping in some areas, but it's not expected to be a major issue. We are expecting, as I said earlier, the temperatures to suit snow melt, and in the southwestern part of the province in particular, gradual melt will be much appreciated. RMs in southeastern Manitoba are watching the water levels from overland flooding closely, and I will again mention and thank our staff who are working closely with our municipal leaders as well to coordinate efforts as best as is possible. The province is also deploying as a standby water-filled barriers to protect vulnerable homes if that is needed. Now, in terms of highways, certain parts of the province have received as much as 4 to 6, not down in snow, but drift snow. And so this is a significant challenge, and this has resulted in some slow progress for cleanup of our roads, some equipment breakdowns. We are deploying through the Highways Department approximately 200 pieces of heavy equipment, including private contractors. There are at present approximately 2,700 kilometers of roads closed. Those closed include parts of highways 244, 21 from the border to Highway 2, 23 between 21 and Nanette, Highway 10 through Riding Mountain. However, by the end of today, we expect that the majority of those highways will be reopened. Manitoba Infrastructure is also assisting Telecommunications to coordinate snow clearing of roads and allow access to towers for repairs to be done and to restore service affecting FleetNet, which is our emergency coordination system, landline and cell services. In terms of hydro, it's a major concern for all of those affected. Last night, we declared a limited state of emergency to allow Manitoba Hydro to access resources from through mutual aid agreements it has with other power providers in Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Minnesota. And Jay, would you like to outline what that means for Manitoba Hydro?
So these are agreements that are reciprocal agreements between utilities. We activated, as of last night, these agreements and have been working with all 3 utilities to source equipment, to source materials, and to source operators for operating that equipment. The kind of equipment that we are looking for is from snow plows and the like to diggers, as well as equipment related to addressing towers that are down. We need steel towers, we need cross arms, a number of pieces of equipment. I would like to say that the damage is unprecedented in some areas. We have more lines and poles down than standing. Our crews are out there working hard, 16 hours a day, doing their best to restore the power. So we apologize to our customers, but we appreciate your patience, and we're working as hard as we can and as fast as we can to get safe, reliable power back to all Manitobans.
Thanks very much, Jay. Thank you for your work. There are clearly going to be some challenges as we move forward, so I'll reiterate thank you for your patience. Thank you not only to hydro customers, but to all Manitobans for their patience and support, in particular of our workers as they are out there working, whether it's hydro workers, road clearing crews, people cleaning up debris. It's critical that we're careful and protect one another as we get involved in the reparation work. So I encourage Manitobans to keep an eye out and to stay away from the affected areas as much as you possibly can to allow workers to do their important work. Manitoba Hydro has made it a top priority to work with critical infrastructure outages in areas like healthcare facilities, personal care homes, hospitals. They are also working with Telecommunications to prioritize restoration as well. In terms of Manitoba infrastructure, local authorities are working to have priority roads cleared so that hydro crews can restore power to customers. There is a temporary power line that will be deployed by Manitoba Hydro to assist in feeding the east side of Portage la Prairie, which has profoundly been affected. Manitoba Hydro will expand the power network into Portage la Prairie where possible. Restoration of power is obviously a high priority, and the assessment that Manitoba Hydro is engaged in the Portage la Prairie community and area is 80% done, so that work is progressing. In terms of Winnipeg, there are approximately 2,000 hydro customers presently out of service, and over the next few days we anticipate that a significant number of those affected customers will have their power restored. As of 1 o'clock this afternoon, and I told you yesterday, over 50,000 hydro customers out of power. Yesterday we're down to 32,000 now, and we're seeing that number drop significantly. So again, our thanks to all of the great people, Manitoba Hydro, that are working as part of the team to restore situations. In terms of communications and information technology, the telecom sector has some ongoing issues with infrastructure. 44 wireless and/or wireline sites are down. An additional 86 are either on battery backup or generator power. I'm going to go back for a second and say, on the healthcare facilities I referenced earlier, it should be noted all of them have backup power. So we are not talking about a situation where any of the facilities, PCHs, hospitals, is without power. Now, the providers on the telecom side are facing the challenge of access to their sites. So again, having the Trans-Canada now open, having the Yellowhead Highway open is going to provide significant relief to field staff to be able to access their sites. Federal agency Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada is connecting industry reps to Manitoba EMO to assist in communicating impacts to telecom infrastructure to Manitoba Hydro. So we're working together, I guess, would be the emphasis here. And this is going to contribute to prioritizing the restoration of power to the impact of telecom's infrastructure and ensuring continuity of service. In terms of the healthcare facilities I referenced earlier, in terms of environmental issues, drinking water system operators from multiple communities have been reporting some issues due to power failures, and those issues are being coordinated by liaising with Manitoba Emergency Control Center, which has, of course, representation from the City of Winnipeg and our municipal leadership as well as Indigenous leadership as part of that dialogue. As I referenced earlier, in terms of First Nations communities, we have a number that are affected. Indigenous Services Canada is working with the Canadian Red Cross to coordinate the activities around First Nations communities, and I understand that you've already had an earlier briefing available from Canadian Red Cross, so I won't duplicate their earlier briefing. We do know that from our reports, 13 communities are presently without power, 5 are experiencing partial outages, and of course the priority is to keep these people safe as well as to keep all Manitobans safe. Our understanding is that some of the communities have self-evacuated. The number of evacuees is unknown at this time, and Canadian Red Cross is working to coordinate this. I wanted to say to all Manitobans, if you get a chance to say thank you to some hydro workers, road crew workers, provincial, municipal, you name it, do it. People are working very, very hard to restore a sense of confidence and normalcy to the things we have taken for granted in other times and must never again. Our municipal and federal and First Nations partners deserve to be thanked as well. This is a very challenging time for people in each of those categories, and we say thank you to them. And I would close by saying thank you also to our other hydro partners and the Canadian and American organizations that have offered their support and encouragement. A thank you to Premier Ford for his personal call. Thank you to Hydro One in Ontario for their support, SaskPower and Minnesota Power as well. We'll get through this, and we'll do it by being respectful and careful and patient. And I also want to say thank you to those who are working to provide flood protection throughout not only the Red River Valley but all affected areas of the province, provincial EMO staff, and the provincial staff that are working long hours to manage our provincial facilities and to coordinate this effort. Thanks to everyone. Please stay off any unnecessary travel that can be avoided. Please do so. And remember that we have folks out there who are putting themselves at risk to repair and to restore the confident use of the facilities that we offer our people for health care, that we offer for to provide hydro, telecommunications, and water services. So please be considerate of their efforts, and a happy Thanksgiving Day to all. Any questions?
Ms. Gould, do you have an estimate as to how long it might take to restore, most 95% or more of the outages? And as part of that, is the accessing of replacement towers part of that? Because that sounds like a big job, not just putting up a pole, but you're transporting a tower somewhere and erecting it.
As the Premier pointed out, we've completed 80% of our assessments. We have another 20% to do. So until we complete the assessments, it would be premature for us to say when we would be in a position to fully restore power throughout the entire province. Yes, it is challenging to replace transmission towers. We are fortunate, though, that the utilities we're working with have equipment, and we're already sourcing towers from our suppliers in Ontario. So really the challenge is the logistics to get that equipment to the locations that we need, given the limited access due to weather on the roads. That's our primary issue, is access.
And Premier, as part of that, if people don't know when their power is going to be restored, and they've been without for 24 might be doable, 36, 48, the house starts to get cold at a certain point. Yeah. Is there a plan for sort of a more organized evacuation beyond the sort of self-evacuation partially in some communities that we've seen?
Well, we're working with uncertainty, obviously. There has been a facility established for shelter in Portage la Prairie already. The local communities lead those efforts in terms of making provision for additional housing if need be. We know that occupancy rates are very, very, very high. Again, it's a difficult situation to monitor. We don't want to over-promise and under-deliver here. So we're optimistic as we see the number of houses that are having power restored go up and the number that don't have power go down, then we're optimistic we're going in the right direction. But it is a call that local governments have to make in respect of how they handle the situation in their areas. We're working through our coordinating body to make sure that all the available information is there to assist each other in making the necessary decisions.
I would like to add that we've restored power to 217,000 of our customers at this point in time, since Thursday.
Do you have a sense of how many power lines are down, transmission lines, et cetera?
We're still working on the assessment, particularly in the north, as we can access greater areas. We are now mobilizing helicopters because previously with the winds we couldn't fly to survey our power lines and the like. So we would have more information once the assessments are all completed.
At this point, I'll just interject, and I know Jay will echo this, but to all of our citizens out there, be very, very careful around power lines, always. In particular right now with the amount of tree damage that we've seen and the potential for you to come into contact with something that you don't want to ever come into contact with. Please be very, very careful around all the power lines.
Absolutely.
Jay, you were noting that there are areas where there's more power lines that are down than standing. What are those areas?
That was something I heard from one of our linemen in the field earlier today. It is in the north, but I can't give you a specific area at this time.
So you mentioned that you were expecting to get a certain number of pieces of equipment in, and you also mentioned operators of this equipment. Do you have any sort of estimate of how many operators, how many people are being brought in order to help the efforts to restore power?
We don't know at this point in time until we complete our assessments. Our priority will be to restore power as quickly as possible. So we will leverage all resources that we can.
And you're saying you're 80% done your assessment. Do you have an estimate of when you'd be done 100% of the assessment?
We anticipate to have 100% completed by tomorrow, subject to weather cooperating.
And after that, after the assessment's complete, do you have any sort of time estimate for when the next stage of work would begin?
Not at this point in time. We would have to complete the assessments.
We'll have another progress report for you tomorrow.
We will.
For your comments, I'm just wondering, obviously this is something that came a lot more intensely than people were expecting, but what did the province do to prepare for this? Because it had been forecasted. Was there any sort of mobilization beforehand in order to prepare these communities that otherwise don't have a lot of resources to deal with the outcome?
Well, okay, on a broad basis, of course, you know that coincidentally, just a few days ago, we introduced the largest increase in our rainy day fund in the history of the province. So in terms of fiscal resources, we have set those aside for eventualities such as this. On the coordination level, we have, of course, the coordinating agency that has been working very well on this issue, in my mind, is the Emergency Measures Organization, and they have been coordinating with representatives from First Nations, from municipal governments, and from each of our government departments, as well as the federal partners that we have. Red Cross would be one. So in terms of preparedness, I believe we have been in as good a shape as we could be to deal with a situation like this, though to a great degree, this is somewhat unprecedented, let's face it.
The declaration of the state of emergency, are there other things that come into play with that other than the relying on other jurisdictions? Does it give hydro workers more access to private property? Does it flow money from the federal government or other funds necessarily?
No, it doesn't address flowing money from the federal government, but it does allow.
It does allow access to private property to do what we need to restore the power.
So that
In
allows the
in
workers
addition-
to work more quickly and restore.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the example Jay raised with me in an earlier conversation was the ability to get stuff across the border from Minnesota more
Yes.
readily, which is important, so.
Staff
we get-
and workers with visas.
So the coordination of access to resources, people, human resources, as well as materials is associated with this declaration, which is designed to facilitate Manitoba Hydro being able to do their repairs, expedite repairs more readily. So we're coordinating, and I think we're demonstrating it's the strength of our federation, and I say thank you to our allies in the power utilities in Ontario and Saskatchewan. Of course, Manitoba has always stepped up when we had the opportunity to help our neighbors, and I guess what comes around goes around, because we're getting great support from our neighbors to the east and west, and to the south, I should mention Minnesota Power
Absolutely.
as well.
In terms of crews from those other hydro, can you speak to the number of crews that have been brought in Minnesota, Saskatchewan, Ontario?
We have not brought anybody in at this point. The state of emergency was enacted at 12:01 this morning, so we're just starting now to coordinate. So I wouldn't be able to speak to specific numbers or crews. As we complete the assessments and our inventory of what we have, as well as what our suppliers can provide, then we'll have a better line of sight to that. As well as we're developing a holistic plan both for the transmission system and the distribution system to look at how we prioritize, which will influence the nature of the crews that we will need support from.
Can there be some clarity in terms of this, I guess, east side of Portage, sort of temporary power? Can you elaborate on what is being done there?
It's a temporary feeder line. So it's the way it could be described is, as someone described it earlier, it's like a long extension cord from our power line to move power from one area to another. So it isn't a permanent structure, but it's a temporary feeder line which will allow us to deliver power to certain parts of Portage.
Percentage-wise, half of Portage, or?
Oh, don't know, sorry.
Just in terms of the fly-in communities, the ones that don't have access to roads to get them evacuated, what is being done to help there? Because we see these communities evacuated every year due to flooding or some other reason. So how has previous efforts been improved upon now in order to get this huge amount of people out?
I think what I'd suggest there, Eileen just came from a meeting with the impacted communities and their leaders, and we'll make Eileen available to give you more detail in specific terms around the Indigenous community situation. She's just returned from a meeting there just an hour ago. Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you to our customers for their patience.